Guys, today we're going to be making this top here. You can either use it just as a summer top or you can actually make it a bikini top. If you are going to make it a bikini top and you plan to wear it in the water, I do recommend just doing some research on a yarn that's safe to wear in the water. So for this top here, which is the top seen in the picture of me, I'm wearing it, I used Hipster Cotton yarn in the color Desert Skies, and it's 100% cotton yarn, and cotton or bamboo yarn is really great for summer. It will make sure that you stay nice and cool. So I do recommend using a cotton or a bamboo yarn in size 3 or a DK weight yarn. So that's this one here. And in the white top that I actually make in the video, this is the yarn that I show in the video. This is Truboo yarn, also a size 3, and it's 100% bamboo, and it's also a size 3 yarn. And you don't have to use these yarns. Any size 3 yarn will work, even an acrylic, but an acrylic will be a bit warmer than using a cotton or a bamboo yarn, which I do recommend for summer. So on top of the yarn, you will also need a Addi knitting machine in the extra large size. And you will also need, I use 2 crochet hooks in the video, a size 4.5 millimeter, and also a size 2.25 millimeter for the strap. You don't need these sizes. Honestly, just one hook will work, and the size doesn't matter too much, but I thought that these 2 sizes worked good. This one to clean up the edges and the smaller hook to make the strap. So I use those 2 hooks. I also used a yarn needle to sew in my ends on my top. So to get started, you want to choose a yarn that you're going to use as scrap yarn, and when choosing the color, just make sure that it's a good contrasting color to the color you're going to be using for your project. So I have my scrap yarn here, and I'm just going to crank the machine until I see the black needle, and there it is, and I'll just put it to the right of the yarn feeder. And we're going to start by putting it underneath that first black needle, and we'll drop the tail into the center, and we're going to go around alternating between the yarn going underneath and in front of the needle and then behind the next needle. Turning while I go, the next one will go in front and underneath that needle, the next one behind, in front, behind, in front, behind, and so on. And I'm just going to continue this all the way around, and when I make it the full circle and I see that black needle again, I'll come back on and we'll go on to the next step together. Alright, I've made it around. I can see that first black needle there, so you want to make sure that that last needle, it works out that you're going behind that one. And if that's not the case, unfortunately, you're going to have to start over because somewhere along the line, something got messed up. So you'll put it behind that needle, and then we're going to open up the yarn feeder. We'll move this a little more to the right, and we're going to put the yarn into that feeder, like so. And then I will close it, and I'll actually set the counter back to 0, and I'm going to go ahead and do 5 rows from this point with the scrap color. So I'm just going to keep cranking, and it will count the rows for me, and when I have a total of 5 rows, I will come back on, and at that point we're going to introduce our main color. When you're working your way around, you just want to make sure that each stitch is working properly, that this yarn is going through that loop and nothing is getting messed up. So definitely go slow for these first couple of rounds, and once you have a couple completed, you can pick up the pace. But as soon as I have my 5 rounds complete, I'll come back on and we'll go on to the next step. All right, I'm just coming up to the end of row 5 here. So stopping right before you get to that black needle, and I'm going to cut my scrap yarn, open up the yarn feeder, and throw that in the middle to the right of the black needle. And at this point, I'm going to bring in my color that I'm using for my top. So I have my white yarn here that I'm going to use. Just unravel that a little bit. And for a size extra small, which is the size of the top seen on my mannequin, I would do 100 rows with your main color. And for a size small medium, which is the size seen on the picture with me in it, I did 105 rows. So you can determine kind of how many rows you need. How I figured it out is the length of the main part of your project here, what this works out to be, goes from kind of the outer side of one nipple all the way around my back and to the other side where my nipple starts. So if you'd rather do it exact, you can figure it out that way. You just unfortunately will have to build up a piece and kind of test it and work it out from there. But for the approximate numbers, it's 100 rows for a size extra small and closer to 105 rows for the small medium. So I'm just going to bring in my yarn here, put it into the feeder there to the right of the black needle, close that feeder, and I'll just hold on to it here to give it a little extra tension. But again, I will grab the tail here of that scrap yarn and my working yarn here, and I will hold it down and start cranking, making sure that it's going in correctly. And once it is, you can kind of let those go. And again, I'm just going to work around the same way, doing on this top here, I'm going to do 100 rows. So I will restart my counter to 0, and I'm just going to keep cranking until I have 100 rows. And when I have those 100 rows, I'll come back on. I just wanted to come back on and say, when you've worked up a long piece that starts to hit the surface that you're working on, just grab all your work from the center and kind of pick it up into the middle. You can even roll it a little bit, just so it stays off of the surface. And then you can keep working. And what this does is just provide a little bit of tension to make sure your stitches are staying on there, and it helps everything run a little bit smoother. So yeah, once you get that up, you can just keep cranking and working like normal, and when it goes back to the surface, just keep lifting it up into the center of the machine. Okay, I'm just coming to the end of my 100th round. So again, I will stop right before the black needle, and I will cut my yarn, and we're going to do another 5 rows with the scrap yarn. So I have it here. So again, I will put it into the feeder to the right of that black needle, and I will hold both the white yarn and that green yarn low with a good amount of tension, and I will start cranking, and once it's going into those stitches correctly, you can let that go. And once again, I'm just going to go ahead and do 5 rows again with this scrap yarn. And once I'm done those 5 rows, I'll come back on and we'll get our project off of the machine. And I'm just about done my 5th row. There we go. Once again, cut your yarn, throw that into the center, and at this point you can just crank the handle and your work will actually just fall off the needles on its own. So again, I ended on that white needle right to the right of that first black needle. So I'm just going to crank the handle like normal. And after it does a complete round, you'll see it just falling off the machine. There we go. And just keep working your way around. And sometimes you actually have to lift it off of that last needle, like so. So once your work is off of the machine, you're just going to give it a light stretch. So I'm just holding on to both ends here and kind of stretching out the work. And at this point, we're going to work on closing up these ends of the tube, but I'll actually bring in the camera a little bit closer just so you can see that part better. So we're going to work on closing up the ends of the tube here. So we're just left with one long panel. So to do that, you can see here that we have our scrap yarn followed by a row of your main project color yarn, followed by another row of your scrap yarn, and then it goes on to the main part of the project. So we're going to be working through these loops that kind of are above the rest of the project, and they stand out pretty easily. As long as you used a good scrap yarn color, you can see those loops that are above the rest pretty easily. So to get started, we're going to put the end that has the yarn tails coming up to one side here, and if you give them a little tug, it kind of makes it easier. And we need to figure out which loop. There'll always be one loop at each end, and then you'll have loops that go along the top and the bottom that go right above each other. So it'll be kind of like this with one loop here and one loop here. This will make a little more sense in just a second. So to figure this out, there's this loop at the end here that your main project color yarn should be kind of right below it. So that will be the end loop on this side. And then you can see, if we work it out, there'll be this loop right above this one right above this one right above this one, and so on. And I'm just going to work my way down, making sure they all line up nicely. And when I make it to this side, you should see here, as long as it worked out good, you'll have one loop at this end. And then you start with your loops on top of each other. So I'm going to insert my 4.5 millimeter hook into this loop that's on the far right hand side. And from here, I'm going to go under that loop right above it and pull that loop through the loop on my hook. And from here, I'll go, excuse me, I'll go into the loop right below and pull that loop through the loop on my hook. And from here, I'll go to the next one above, pull through the loop on my hook, And next up is the next loop on the bottom. And pull through. And I'm just going to work my way along, alternating between pulling the loop on the top through the loop on my hook and then on the bottom through the loop on my hook. So I just did the bottom there. Now I'll go to the next available loop up top, like so, and pull through the loop on my hook. Next available loop on the bottom, pull through the loop on my hook. And I'm just going to keep working my way across, doing this, making sure it's always that loop that kind of stands above all the other ones. Top and bottom. And when I make my way to the far left-hand side, I'll come back on and I'll show you how to finish this side up. Just thought I'd come back on and say, I remember when I first started doing this, I often used to get confused about which line I'm supposed to go under, but it's always, you can see if you look, if you're confused between two, just look at the line and you can see that one's getting pulled up. So I know it's not that one and it will be the next available one. I hope that's helpful. And again, when you go up top and you're confused, is it that one or that one? Just look and you can see that one is getting pulled up through a little loop. So you know it's not that one and you go on to the next one. So hopefully that little tip is helpful and ensures you're not missing any stitches or doing 1, 2 times. It's always the next available stitch that is not surrounded by anything. All right, I'm just about at the end here. So I just pulled in a loop from the top. And again, I will grab that loop from the bottom. The ends can get a little tricky, but if you just move everything around a little bit, it should make it a little bit clearer which loop to go through. And then the final loop up top on this side is the loop that scrap yarn is going through. And then there's one more on the bottom. You can ignore that tail of your main project color. Just hold that out of the way. So we have the final loop on the bottom. And then you're going to go through that loop, that single loop that was on this side, and pull that through. And what I do at this point, just to secure everything nicely, is grab your main project color yarn and wrap it around your hook and pull that through the loop on your hook. And you can pull that tight and that kind of secures everything nicely. So at this point, we're just going to pull out our scrap yarn, and you'll find that on one side of the tube, the scrap yarn comes out very easily, and on one side it doesn't. And I'll give you a little trick just to get it out on the side that doesn't. So if you give each end a tug, this is the side that comes out easily. So you just keep pulling the end, and it will just, you'll watch your scrap yarn come out really nicely. Just pulling out the final row here. And it comes out super easy, and you can see that end has been sewn together essentially by doing that, and it looks really nice. So we're going to just turn our work over here and work on closing up the opposite side. So I'll just lay this out straight. And once again, we're going to do the same thing of finding the loop that's on the far left-hand side. So that loop that yarn is coming out of, And then I'm just going to make sure all the loops line up here. So this is the first one on the top. So I'll make sure that's lining up like so. And all I'm doing here is just making sure those loops line up, and when I make my way to the end, it should work out that I have just that one loop on the right hand side, the same way that worked out on the opposite side. And there we go. Perfect. So I'll just work my way along doing the exact same thing, putting my hook through that loop on the right, through the first loop on the top, pulling it through, first loop on the bottom, and pulling that through, and just working my way along. And once again, when I make it all the way across over to this side, I'll come back on, and I have one more loop on the bottom here. And again, the loop that remains on the side on its own. And once again, I will hook on to that tail of your project yarn and pull it through the loop on your hook. Pull everything tight, and that's all secure. And we have both ends closed now. So because the other side was the side that scrap yarn was easier to pull out, I know this will be the difficult side. So you can see if I pull both ends, nothing happens. So how you do that is you can locate one strand that's going through the top here. So you can see this strand is going through the top loops. And if you just work your way around, removing that top piece of yarn, once you make your way back around, when it's removed entirely from that first row, after that row, it will come out very easily. So I'll just keep working my way around, pulling out that top strand of yarn until I make my way back around, and then it will pull out very nicely. And if you're having troubles, honestly, just kind of cutting off a bunch of the scrap yarn and just removing it the best you can, that will work completely fine. But I'll come back on when I've removed this top strand all the way around, and we'll go on. All right, I'm just pulling it through the last couple, and you can see from there it will start to pull out. If I get all these other out of the way, other strands out of the way, there we go. Just so you can see it a little bit better, you can see it just starts to pull out really nicely, just like the other side. So just keep pulling out that scrap yarn until it's all the way out. And if you end up pulling out all of your scrap yarn and you notice that you have a stitch that didn't get picked up properly and you can see it coming down, now is just a good time to, if you have a yarn needle, and you can just attach some of your main project yarn to that, or actually even use this tail here. You can put it onto a yarn needle and just work your way down and grab the stitch to make sure, and just sew it in nicely, maybe with a couple of knots. Or don't stress too much if you did lose a stitch. Just make sure that in the end you have a piece of yarn that has it picked up and it won't come completely unraveled. So at this point we're going to keep our hook here and bring in your main project yarn, and we'll work on cleaning up these edges a little bit, but otherwise we're getting close. Okay, to clean up the edges here, you want to decide which side of the project you'd like showing on the outside and which side will be the inside of the project. They look pretty similar to me, but if there's one side that stands out to you that looks a little bit neater, you can just use that side. So once you have your side picked, I'll face it towards me here. So this is the side that I want to be showing on my work when I'm wearing it. And I'm going to start on the far right hand side of one of the ends. So I'm going to insert my hook. If you look at the top, you can see it's a little bit difficult with the white yarn. But if you look, there's the little, just like if you're familiar with crochets, you can see the little V's, and that was just from closing up this edge. So I'm going to start in the far right kind of V. I'm going to insert my hook there, so both of those strands are on top of my hook, like so. And I'll pull through my main project yarn, like so, and I will drop my tail. I'll work that in as I go, and I'm going to chain one. And I'll actually work over this other tail as well, just to have those more properly sewn in. So into that same stitch that you just brought the yarn through, into that space there, I'm going to do a single crochet, again working over these tails. Like so, just one single crochet. And then I'm going to work my way across with single crochets, but I'm not going to go into every V there. I'm going to skip the next one, and into the one following, I'll do another single crochet. So I just kind of wiggle my hook through until both loops are on top of the hook with another single crochet. And again, I will skip that next V and into the one right next to it, right here. I will go in with another single crochet. And sometimes you have to wiggle your hook a little bit, but get it in there with a single crochet. And I'm just going to work my way across doing the same things. In fact, I'm just going to drop these tails out of the way so you can see a little bit easier. And eventually I'll be able to just put it right into the center of the work because you won't even see that. And I'll show you that part in a little bit. So again, skip a V and into the next one. Again, you may have to kind of wiggle it a little bit until you have the two strands of yarn on top of your hook with a single. Skip. And here we go, single. And I'm just going to keep working my way across, doing the same thing. And once I've made it to the end, it should work out where your final single is right into that corner. And once I'm there, I will come back on and we'll go on. Okay, I'm just coming to the end here, and I have one final one to skip, and into that final stitch, I will do my final single crochet. And it should work out that you have 23 single crochets across. And here I'm just going to chain one and cut my yarn and pull that through and pull tight like so. So that's one end complete. And on the other side, we're going to do the exact same thing. So just make sure not to turn your work over or anything. We're still looking at the side we want to be showing. It'll be the same process. On the far right hand side, we're going to insert our hook and pull the yarn through. And drop that tail, chain one, and we'll do a single crochet back into that stitch. And again, I'll just work my way across, skipping one of those V's, and into the next one we'll do a single. So it's the exact, same. I got a little snagged there, but it's the exact same on both sides. I'll redo that one. The yarn got a little bit snagged. It's the exact same as the other side we just worked on. Skipping and single. And it again should work out that you have 23 single crochets when you're all done, with the last one going into this last V stitch there. And if you can't quite figure that all out, just make sure there's 23 on each side, and that will work perfectly. So once I've finished up that side, I'll come back on. Okay, to sew in your ends, all you have to do, just get my needle on the yarn here, and all you have to do is get that strand of yarn into the center of the project. You can see it's two sides. So if you just put that yarn right down through the center, making sure not to go through the other side. So I'll just go down a couple stitches and then come back out and pull that yarn through. And I'll go down through that same space I just brought my hook out of and work my way down a couple more, coming back out, and it's just hiding it right into the center of that project. So I'm going to go around doing the same process on all those strands of yarn, and then once I have it down a little bit, I'll just kind of stretch it out and cut this tail, and it will be hidden right in the center of the project. So as soon as I'm done that, I'll come back on and we'll make the strap together. All right, so to do the strap, we're going to bring in our 2.25 millimeter hook. You do not have to use this hook. You can use any hook size. I just find that the strap looks a little bit nicer the smaller the hook that you use. So to figure out the length of the strap, all I did was measure from one hip all the way up around my neck and back down to the other hip. And that was just approximate. I was just hoping that would be a good length, and it actually worked out quite nicely. So you can figure out your strap length by doing the same thing, by either measuring and then just making a strap that comes to that length, or you can keep holding the strap up to yourself, whatever works best. So for me, I'm going to do a chain of 425, but keep in mind I do crochet quite tight, so it could end up being that yours you need less chains. So you'll just kind of have to figure it out that way. I will measure it once I have it all built up. I'll measure it, and you can work one up that comes to that same measurement if you'd like. So to do a chain, we just take we'll start with a slip knot on our hook. So if you don't know how to do that, we're going to take the short end of the yarn. We'll put it right over that long end, whoops, like so. So there's a loop, and then we're going to take that loop and fold it over that long end of yarn. This is the yarn attached to the ball. And then we're going to grab that loop right in the center while holding that short end and just pull everything tight. And that's a slip knot. And if you pull on your long end, it will tighten that right up to your hook. So yarn over, pull through. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'm just going to keep on working up a super long chain of. All right, I just finished up my super long chain here, which I measured, and it comes out to 52 inches long. So if you'd like to make it the same size, I think that'll work nicely anywhere in all the sizes. I think that'll work out okay. So from here, I'm going to cut the yarn, and then I will pull that yarn through and pull tight. And I'm actually going to create a couple of knots at the end just so everything stays put and doesn't come unraveled. So I'll just create a basic knot, and I'm going to wiggle that knot until it's right, just continuously pushing it down until it's right at the start of the chain there. And I will do a couple, doing the same thing of wiggling that knot down. And sometimes it takes a little work, but just pushing it down as I tighten. And you can either sew in the end into that strap, or you can just cut it. As long as you have a bunch of knots, that should stay put nicely. I'll do one more knot. There we go. And on one I did sew in this end into the strap, but on this one I'll just cut it right up below that bottom knot, as close to it as I can get, and I will cut. And I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. So once I have that all done, I'll come back on and we'll get our strap weaved into the top. Looking at the front right side of your project, we're going to bring in our long strap here, and I'm also going to use my 4.5 millimeter hook that I use to clean up these edges here, but again, any hook size will work just fine. And this is going to take a little bit of wiggling around just to make sure that it's the same on both sides, but I'm just making sure it's equal here and bringing that strap down, keeping in mind there'll be a little bow here, so I'm kind of just working out how much strap I'll need at the bottom to account for a bow down here, so that should be good. And then I will move this back up, and all I'm going to do is just start weaving it through these sides. So I'll take where that strap meets the top, and I'll start in that very top single crochet stitch that we did. That's the upper left there, and I'm going to pull the strap through that stitch. And again, it can take a little bit of wiggling to get it through, but just be patient. There we go. And I'll pull that through. And we have it attached to the top left. And then from the opposite side, I'm going to go into the next stitch. So coming from the inside of the top to the outside. go through the next available stitch, grab that strap again, and pull through. And pull that strap through. I'm making sure to be pulling the bottom and through, and not this top, which will go up and around the neck. But again, we can move everything around after to make sure it's all sitting good. And now we go into the next one, coming from the front of, or the outside of the top to the inside. I'll put my hook through that next available stitch, grab the strap, pulling that strap through the stitch, and pull it through. And I'll show you one more time, going from the opposite side, from the inside of the top to the outside, through that next available stitch, making sure both those loops are on my hook, grabbing the strap, pulling through. And this is the process here for this side. And I'm just going to keep working my way down, alternating which side I'm pulling the strap through. And once I make it all the way to the bottom, I'll come back on and we'll start working on this side together. Okay, I'm on the last stitch on the left-hand side here, coming from the inside to the outside, so I'll get my hook through that last stitch and pull it through. And we have it all weaved in on the left-hand side. So now we're going to work on the right side here. And I'm just going to do the exact same process. And because up top I came from the outside of the top to the inside on that first stitch, I'm going to make sure to do the same thing on this side. And if you did the opposite to start, just make sure you're starting the same way. So I'll get my hook through there, and sometimes the first one and the last one can be a little bit tight. You have to wiggle your hook a little bit extra on that first one and the last one. So again, I will just pull, leaving a good amount of length. I will pull that strap through that first stitch. There we go. And work my way down with the same process, alternating. So now I will come from the inside to the outside and pull that strap through. And I'll work my way down. And once again, when I make it to that last stitch, I will come back on. And after making sure everything's in the right place, at that point, we should be done our top. So I'll see you in just a second here. Right, I just weaved it through that final stitch, coming from the inside to the outside, and I pulled it through. And you can see that everything is all kind of wonky now. The right strap is way longer than the left. So you're just gonna kind of pull everything until it's the right length. If you just hold one side and kind of wiggle everything around. Until you have a good length up top to go up and around your neck. And it can take a little work getting it, but if you just kind of wiggle everything around, eventually you'll be able to get that strap where you want it to be. I'll bring in my finished top here. That's sitting nicely. This is the one that I'm wearing in the picture. You can see it's equal straps are equal on both sides, and then I have a good length up top. And all I do is, to get this part around my neck, you just fold it over like so, so it crosses in the middle, and then your head would go through this side. And then you kind of tighten everything up down here and tie a nice bow. And what weaving that strap through these sides did is, when you tie it up down here, it kind of cinches everything up and pulls it closer so it sits really nicely on your chest. So I think that's everything. I really hope that you like how your top came out and that it fits you nicely and you're happy with it all.